The 41-year-old Kirsty Coventry, who is raising two daughters with her husband, is currently the Minister of Sport in her home country, Zimbabwe. As a swimmer, she competed in 5 Olympics, and at the time of her retirement, she held the most Olympic medals in individual women's swimming events, tied with the Hungarian swimmer Krisztina Egerszegi. She is an Olympic and world champion and also holds world records. Since her retirement, she has worked in sports diplomacy and played a significant role in developing the strategy of the Athletes Commission. If elected, she could become the first female and the first African president of the International Olympic Committee.
Kirsty Coventry, thank you so much for accepting the invitation for this interview. Well, I think it's one of the most amazing journey you have been doing as a young mother, traveling around, campaigning and participating in basically in this very exciting race, a competition. And of course, you're used to the competition. And I understand, and I've actually followed your comments on the fact that you don't want to make an advantage of the fact that you're a woman or your mother. And I'm not talking about that we should talk about the difficulties or the hardships of it, but let's talk just a little bit about the complexity of this journey that you have been on. Yeah. Because I think this is definitely something that we should be aware of.
Yes. No, it's been an incredible journey, actually. I was having the opportunity to talk with the members about the possibilities that we see as the Olympic movement in our future and what that can look like. It's been, the last, 6 months have really given me the unique platform to have that dialogue with our members. And you realize how strong a membership we have and how many members have their own stories, their own experiences, and their own knowledge on so many different sectors of our lives. And that really gives me a lot of faith that our movement is in a good space and a very solid space, and gives me the confidence that we're going to be able to tackle any of the challenges that come our way in the future.
Is it a challenge to be a woman in this community today, and especially to be one of the candidates as a woman and a mother of 2?
I have been asked a few times the same question, and the membership really have been so embracing of all 7 of the candidates. And I was just having a conversation earlier today about how proud I am that every member is really taking the time to seriously sit down and consider who they feel they can put their trust and belief into leading our organization, and also what that leader should look like. And it was one of the reasons that I thought about when I was running. I wanted the opportunity to give back to a community that has changed my life, that has given me so many opportunities. I want to ensure, being a mother of 2 kids, 2 girls, that the movement remains relevant for when they get old enough to know what the Olympic Games is, and the values that we bring as a movement: respect, friendship, excellence, learning how to fail but to get back up and go again, learning resilience, learning that everyone's different but we can respect those differences. In today's world, those values are extremely powerful, and I believe we have a unique opportunity to share those values with the world, to ensure that our children and my children are growing up in a society that gets along better than where we are today.
Yeah, but we have a lot to do till then. Yeah, but so if you're approaching this from the practicality side, that actually you're traveling alone now with your baby, right?
Yes, with my assistant. I have an incredible assistant, and I have an incredible husband at home with my 6-year-old. But it takes a team. And in African culture, we have a saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Because you need everyone.
Okay.
There are different people in your families, your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, the grandparents, that instill different values into your child.
And impacts as well.
Impacts them. And you want them to have the best of all of that. So I have an incredible village of strong people that are supporting me along this journey. And I'm very grateful. And I'm not unaware of the appreciation that I have for them to help me in this journey.
Yeah, it's very important what you just said about it takes a team, and I have to have a fantastic background, because I've been also asked this question so many times.
Yes, I'm sure.
In media, especially I would say men-dominated field in sports media.
Yep.
And I always said, please, I mean, allow me to be a mother, to be a wife, but also someone who is really enthusiastic about her profession. So
yes.
Why should I choose?
Yeah.
How many times have you encountered this kind of, let's make a choice.
Yeah.
Do you want to be a mother or you want to have a career? So, and how did you overcome on those obstacles?
So I think one of the first times that I became a little bit more aware of being asked questions like this was when I was still competing. I retired in 2016 after 5 Olympic Games, so I was a much older athlete than most of my competitors.
Let's say experience, not older,
experience.
just experience.
I started getting asked, like, well, don't you want to have a family? And I kept thinking to myself, but do I have to choose? Like, is that, and okay, in swimming, for some sports, you can not have to choose. You can do both and come back quite quickly. But in swimming, there's not many swimmers, female swimmers, that have started a family. And
not many gymnasts either.
Yeah. Exactly, right? So it's dependent on the sport. And so in this new role, in the sports administrative role, again, we're predominantly still men, I would say there's been a number of times where it hasn't been so direct in that, oh, you're a young mother, you're a woman. It's been done in a slightly more diplomatic way.
But still
you're like, so I generally try to be maybe sometimes a little bit more aggressive. I'm like, so what actually are you saying?
Yes,
like,
yes,
what are you trying not to say? And let's just have an open conversation. But then I've also realized that actually right now we still have to, as women, prove that we can do both, that we can be a wife and a mother, and we can have a very strong career. And again, part of the reason why I am in this race is because I want to make it easier for the next woman to come through, for my girls to do and look at whatever they want to do, and it's easier for them. Just like the woman before us made it easier for our journeys, right? And it's a legacy that you're trying to create, and you're trying to open up their minds. And right now we might have to work a little harder to convince those that we're capable, we're serious, we know a lot more, we've experienced a lot of things, and you have to prove it to them. And I'm okay doing that. I'm okay saying, okay, I understand that this could, you need to take a little bit of time to understand, but I'm going to prove it to you. And I take it on as a bit of a challenge. And I've found that if I take it from a stance of not being defensive, of not being like, well, why are you asking me that? You didn't ask the male candidates that. And I take it from a point of, how can I get someone to understand my perspective, right, in a different way? Then you have a much more open opportunity to have a real discussion with someone. And I have been pleasantly surprised with how open the members are being. They really are, and I'm grateful to that, to to have open conversations with people about my family, about how my husband and I have chosen to be in this race and how we work as a team. And sometimes that can be hard for people to understand, but once you have the opportunity or the platform to have that conversation with them, I've really seen a much more accepting way or possibility of what things could look like.
That is very, I would say, very promising. But of course, the IOC, I think it's a great community, you know, with people coming from all over the place with a real cultural background. What was the most awkward questions that you've been asked ever since you entered not just the candidacy, but in basically sports leadership as a woman?
Yeah,
if you can remember.
God, that's a good question. I might have to come back to you on that one. I might need to go back. I write little notes and write things down. I don't know, actually. I think, you know, I definitely, I know that I've had a few different comments where it's sort of taken me by surprise. And I'm like, what? But I think it's probably a lot of the questions that you would have faced or other women that are trying to do something for the first time, right? And again, I think for me, it's looking at it and not reacting to it in a way that seems defensive, but more saying, okay, I have an opportunity to try and change this person's perspective on how I do things and what that looks like for me. And our generation. But yeah, off the top of my head, I can't think. I know I have some, so I'll definitely have to come back to you.
All right. But it seems that basically it's a very, I would say, healthy solution that you're taking it on an explanatory basis rather than, as you said, an offensive one. And of course, one of these, let's say, critiques is that you probably met several times is about that, okay, Kirsty Coventry is Thomas Bach's favorite, so it's going to be easy for her because she's been pushed. So I'm sure that you had to become sort of bulletproof by this time. So what is your reaction to these kind of questions, and what is your, I would say, not just answers but reaction to self-defense yourself from this kind of
well, I think definitely
offenses.
as an athlete who has come from a country who's gone through different turmoils, you definitely build up a thick skin from becoming a minister and having to go into parliament and not be the most popular sometime because of the decisions
By the way,
made.
You also had some critics from your country. You know that.
Yes.
You know that it's
you know, so I have definitely built a thick skin. But again, I think it's about having open communication with people and trying to explain why we took a decision in Parliament. Why did we do this, right? And try and talk with the critics. I think as soon as you stop that line of communication, nothing is achievable. I think you have to always have open communication, just like I believe in order to create change, of cultural change, you have to have a seat at the table. You can't stand from outside and shout and scream and expect something to change. It's just not how it works. So, you know, I think, again, when you have different things said and asked, whether it's, oh, she's a young mother, or, oh, she has the backing of the seating president, it's, again, how are you going to deal with it? What are you going to tackle? What are you going to talk about? And that's how I've taken the approach, to say, this is my campaign. This is what I stand for. This is what I believe in the movement. This is how I believe we have a unique opportunity as a movement for evolving into the future and what that looks like, and embracing technology and figuring out new ways of raising our revenue and then distributing that to the athletes, to the Olympic committees, to the federations. What does that look like? That is, for me, how I like to tackle some of those conversations. It's really about turning those around and saying, this is why I believe I'm a strong candidate, and I want you to believe in me, and not because of what other people are saying. This is the tactic.
Yeah, okay. You have been mentioning so many important topics and issues that I think are absolutely crucial regarding who is going to be leading the IOC in the future. Let's start with something that, or continue with something that I think is in between us is the most natural thing, about the defense of the female or women's category.
Yeah.
I also asked some of the other candidates about it, and I think we can all agree on it that the fantastic Paris Olympics, one, I would say, little bit nasty spot was this issue, basically, you know, what happened in the boxing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you know, big politics have been involved with it, you know, with the leadership of the previous boxing union, IBA, and all those things. But in general, I think the major question is, because the responsibility has been sort of pushed over to the international federations in the last couple of years. Which from some perspective can be understandable because of the differences of the sports. But should IOC have its own standpoint, guidelines, anything that would say, okay, this is what we think about defending females category for the sake of the fair competition. And of course, you, international federations, can alter in a little bit, but never, you know, just letting out of sight the guidelines.
Yes.
Okay, maybe I can write the next rule for that.
No, I think the IOC should take a leadership role in saying that. I do think that in order to take that leadership role, because the responsibility has been with the international federations, I would want to pull them all together, sit down, because we don't need to redo work that's already been done. A lot of the bigger international federations have worked with their medical and scientific research teams and that's how they came up with their own guidelines.
Right.
We don't need to go and redo that work. Rather, let's bring them in, let's sit down, let's listen, let's hear, and let's come up with a set of criteria and guidelines to protect the female category. Yes, it might change here and there depending on the sport. Equestrian, men and women compete against each other. Maybe it's not relevant for them, but other sports, it will be very relevant. So let's take that leadership role, let's work with the IFs, and let's come up with that criteria and that framework.
Yes, for example, Donna De Verona, who I really admire, and she has a very strong point with that. And she said, from certain perspective, of course, sports discriminates in a way that's why, for example, in para sports we have different kind of injury levels and categories. We also have age groups that you don't let the 14-year-olds together with the 23, because there is a way how you would like to keep the fair competition.
Yes, 100%.
So if we look at it from that point of view, from the physicality, then it's very, very crucial, important. It's not just a matter of self-defining ourselves.
No, you know what? I think above anything else, everyone should have access to sport, regardless of gender.
Right.
But when it comes to high-performing sport, we are not having the conversation around how it's negatively impacting men's sport.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
This is also and that in of itself is showing that there are disadvantages. And everything that you've said is, I think, the majority of the members agree with. And so let's take that leadership role.
So it's important from the next IOC president's perspective.
Yes, I think so, yeah.
All right. Money, it's always a major issue. If you can still have or will have the ability to attract the Olympic movement to the major global sponsors, or maybe even we have to think a little bit differently from sponsorship after some major companies pulling out, for example, from Japan, and also what and how do we spend that money in a way that we also would like to sort of finance the athlete's career in a way. So, of course, there are different kind of opinions. Someone would like to give prize money. The other one thinks differently. What is your view of that?
I'm not a fan of the prize money. From my personal experience as an athlete, the hardest part of my journey was becoming an Olympian. I would have loved to have more support in that part of my journey. Once you're an Olympian, once you're making finals, once you're medaling, you're attracting sponsors.
So when you are showcased, basically, when you're in the window.
Exactly, when you're there. But the journey to get there is very hard. And it puts pressure on your family that are supporting you. It puts pressure on everything. And so I would rather find a way to better support athletes on their journey to becoming an Olympian. And again, for me, I was an Olympic Solidarity athlete, scholarship holder. That money was huge. It wasn't very much, but it changed how I had to think about what I was spending on, what I was doing, budgeting. I could travel. I could take my coach with me to competitions. It completely changed how I did things. So that was a different level. It was a completely different level. Uh-huh. And that is very important. I would like to see us focusing in on finding and identifying programs like that we can expand, personally. Revenue we have to look at. We have to look at the revenue, how we're stable and we're in a solid position, but we are consistently expected to do more. Now, I think there's a balance. I don't think we can just continue to grow for growth's sake. We are going to have to look at the sports program, at the events, what it looks like, new sports that are relevant today versus sports that are maybe losing a little bit of relevancy, where, how, what, we have to have those conversations. But at the end of the day, we also need to ensure that our values are being recognized and we're partnering with strong sponsors that recognize the value, recognize the integrity in the values, and share the same values, and want to grow the values base, right? And I think we can do that in a number of different ways. I think we've got extremely loyal partners for the next 8 to 10 years. And maybe we need to look at doing something slightly different and opening it up. I think we need to focus on new regions, and what those regions could bring in terms of possibilities of brands. If we look at just in Africa, by the time we get to 2030, we're going to have close to 1 billion or over 1 billion people under the age of 35. Yeah. How are we impacting that, right?
That generation is not really interested in just, but only in digital
exactly.
solutions.
So how are we
entertainment?
So I remember I was 9 years old when I watched the Olympic Games. Those are the games, 92 games, when I remember watching and remembering, and I have visual memories of it. A 9-year-old today is on their cell phone.
I know.
How are we going to inspire them? How are we going to connect with them through that cell phone? How are we going to help, tell the story of how a 9-year-old around the world was videoed by their peers running and picked up by an international coach? Because the technology is there. We can do that. How are we going to do that? How are we going to impact that generation? How are we going to not just identify new talent, but link them with the best coaches, link them with the best nutritionists, get them, close that playing field so that anywhere in the world there's a possibility of a 9-year-old winning our next Olympic medal, right? Yeah. That for me is, I think, one of the biggest questions that as a membership we need to answer together. I have certain ideas on it. I think that in terms of what we have right now, when we look at the AI agenda, it's an incredible document and it's very strong. How are we going to implement it? How do we implement it? We can have good ideas, but now it's about implementation. And when we implement it, what do we see? How do we see it working? How do we see it step by step? And then it's looking and saying, okay, what other things are we going to look at and have discussions about? That's all exciting. I'm excited. I'm excited about the different opportunities.
Exciting. Sometimes it's even frightening, but we will see what is coming.
You know, I think there's always going to be challenges. And a friend of mine said to me, you know, they said to me the other day, they're like, yeah, I think you thrive off like chaos, and not even chaos, just like if you see a challenge, you have to like try to do it and
solve the problem.
And solve it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, it's not about solving it. Sometimes it's about the journey that we're taking in trying to solve a challenge. You realize the strength of the members. Right. You realize the opportunities that lie ahead. You realize that sometimes you're going to fail.
But, you know...
But that's part of life.
Exactly. And there are a few of us who are naturally born to solve problems, actually. So let's talk about one more important issue. Of course, there are a lot of things, but this one I think is really important because you have still the closest perspective to the active athletes, of course, because of your age and your background. And I think if you're talking about... fair competition on the field of play, we also have to talk about the fair competition off the field of play, of course. And this is about clean competition, about doping, and also not just that, but sometimes the mismanagement of how we encounter those problems. And the other day we had a chance to talk shortly about a case. Now, unfortunately, we have a final results from CAS regarding one of the Hungarian Olympic bronze medalist swimmer who appealed, Tamás Kenderesi, after a 4-year of ban. That was it was sentenced in Hungary on the first case. And to be honest, as a sports lawyer, I had a closer look at the case, and many things is just not clear. Not about the basis of the whole idea, not about the way it has been handled from the legal perspective, not the time has been spent, which was more than 2.5 years of getting this result. You know, and what if he was basically released? Then what do you do with the swimming career, taking out 2.5 years of your career? So and from the other hand, let me mention Sinner's case, the world #1 male tennis player at the moment, which was also just happening the other day. And of course, we know that there are not two similar cases, but when you see, that the outcome is so much different, that he has been convicted, in 2 times with the substance as doping, and still he only has 3 months to be taken out from the professional tennis, not losing basically nothing. So, of course, the question remains that how can you still sustain your trust within this whole environment, within the legal, answers and solutions, if you meet cases so differently far away from each other?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's an incredible, pertinent question. And we have to ensure that as sports leaders, we are putting in place rules and regulations where everyone is treated the same. And we really have to fight to ensure that that's happening. And the reason I say that is because it calls into question the integrity. It calls into question the integrity of the anti-doping associations.
Exactly.
It calls into question the integrity of the federations. And once you have people from outside or even within the sports movement questioning these stakeholders that are so important to our movement, you're on a slippery slope. So we have to really make sure that those rules and regulations and those processes are being followed, and not just being followed, but really being adhered to by everyone across the board. Everyone must be treated the same. That's why we have WADA. WADA is there to ensure that everyone is following the same rules and regulations. They need to do that. And I know we've had this conversation before to say athletes are treated one way and the system around the athletes are sometimes treated differently. Everything and everyone should be treated and held to the same accountability.
Yeah, because it shouldn't be a difference, that how much money you have for lawyers, where you're coming from, what are your chances to defend yourself. That definitely should be
no, but then you're just playing
playground.
politics.
Yes,
you're playing. I think at that point, if we lose the integrity of following the rules and regulations, and ensuring that those rules and regulations are abided by everybody, and then everyone is treated the same. If we're not doing that, then I'm not sure what we're doing, right? Sport is the reason that sport breaks down barriers. The reason that sport is a universal language is because the rules and regulations are known, everyone respects them and abides by them on the field of play. And if you don't, you get a red card, or you get sent off, or you get suspended. If we lose that, it's not good for sport.
Definitely not. But I really hope that with all your plans to accomplish in the management of the international sporting world, maybe within IOC, you will be able to change those things. And congratulations for your speed, your energy, your pioneer steps, and all the best of luck for the upcoming weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kirsty Coventry, for the interview. Thank you.
Thank you.